Welcome to the CBIA BizCast powered by Google. On this podcast, we dive into stories about Connecticut businesses.
Downs Construction actually came to my school.
And business leaders.
I think it's always also really important to be able to see a path forward.
Who are shaping the future of Connecticut's economy. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amanda Marlowe with CBIA, and today we're joined by Brian Zelman of Zelman Real Estate. Brian, welcome to the BizCast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We are really excited to have you here. We've been reading a lot about some of the projects that you've been doing around the state, and we definitely want to talk a little bit about those. But first, let's start off and talk a little bit about you. So you are born and raised in Connecticut?
Yep, born and raised in Bloomfield and live in West Hartford.
And tell me a little bit about how you broke into this real estate business.
I guess I've always been interested in real estate from a young age, and kind of took a circuitous path to real estate. Started as a broker in the residential side of the business, quickly migrated to the commercial side, doing land development deals and representing tenants primarily in the retail space. And quickly from there, the retail tenants relationships moved into development, and we've sort of migrated to multifamily lately.
And from the get-go, kind of, did you start on your own, or had you been working with another firm?
I mean, I've always sort of worked with partners in one degree or another, but really in the real estate business, especially in the beginning in brokerage, you're really you're still on your own to a great degree.
So tell me a little bit more about that transition from kind of the beginning stages to really getting to that business to that multifamily.
Yeah, we were working on a healthcare project in Bloomfield, and there was a piece of land that I had known the family who owned it for many, many years, and no one could really figure out what to do with that land. And at the time, several multifamily projects had been developed in the area, and one specifically in that town. It leased up very quick and sold very quick. And it just kind of planted the seed that this could be a good opportunity to do multifamily. And those projects take a long time, so we just completed that project, so that was about 3 years ago. So after getting started on that project, a year in, a lot of other opportunities in that same space started to present themselves.
What kind of opportunities does that present for the business as well? Making that expansion to have all of those different options.
Yeah, tremendous. I mean, there's a lot of different spaces within multifamily. I know, we chatted about affordable housing. That's one piece that we're just dipping our toe in now. Geographically, there's a big shortage of housing across the entire country and in Connecticut. So, geographically and then, demographically, there's just a lot of different product type that can be built.
What are some of the new projects that you're looking to do? You said you just finished that up. Tell me kind of about the expansion efforts now. Yeah,
well, we have a couple projects in construction or mobilizing shortly for construction. We're under construction in West Hartford on a mixed-use project. Right on Farmington Avenue, so it's very small boutique, high-end, 48 units, over 10,000 square feet of commercial. No amenities in that project, unlike the other projects, because West Hartford Center is the amenity and the accessibility and walkability to everything else there. So that's sort of it's suburban, but it's really an urban type project. And this fall, hopefully, we'll be breaking ground in East Hartford on about 400 units. The redevelopment of the former Showcase Cinema site. And that's on 16 acres, probably about 8 residential buildings. I mean, it's very campus-like, but we're not just going to create a flat sea of asphalt. There's a lot of thought that went into creating a landscape and an environment to really build a community.
And what kind of, when you're looking at this, you're building these things, previously commercial, you see the impact, and now you're in these giant housing units. What do you see as the real impact, and how does it impact your work?
You're creating housing for folks, but you're also creating something that, is going to, last several lifetimes, hopefully. So, to be able to have an impact on the landscape, literally, we have to take that seriously and make sure that what we're designing, something that fits the greater community, and is welcome. So we're always just sort of reading the landscape and figuring out what the best, really what the best fit is.
I think when we talk about the movie theater, that so many people know that, they've driven by that, and now there's going to be this new housing there. And that creates some sort of a buzz in the community to really help uplift, I think.
There's no question about that. I mean, that project was sort of born out of a Silver Lane corridor study that was done. And this project is designed to be the catalyst for the revitalization of Silver Lane. So the town just took possession of a shopping center out front, which they're going to be demolishing, and hopefully that will be retail. With all the new residents, there'll be demand and need for retail, and I think the intention is for that development to continue down Silver Lane.
And affordable housing, as you touched on briefly before, it's really been a big conversation starter right now in the state of Connecticut. So what do you think the impact will be as you and other firms start to really focus on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the impact will be tremendous. There's a lot of challenges. There's thousands and thousands of units that need to be built, and we're losing units as time goes on. So I think the impact is a little bit of catching up and providing opportunities for folks to live in the communities that they work in, that they've potentially been priced out of, or to provide really new housing stock. There's more demand than there is for supply of affordable housing, but the product that's out there is it's old, 30, 40, 50 years. Some of it's been reinvested in, but the demand for market rate housing and affordable housing is so great because we haven't built at scale in Connecticut for a really long time.
Do you think that there's some sort of a misconception?
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I think that conversation is bubbling to the surface a little bit. Affordable housing is really, it depends on the percentage of AMI that you're looking at, but it's really workforce housing, generally speaking. Police officers, teachers, firefighters, folks who are just starting early on in their careers, and they're going to grow, and they're going to grow their incomes, and that's to provide them new housing to live in while they become part of a community and move on in their careers.
And I'm sure going from doing a lot of commercial to now housing, multifamily housing, there's a little bit of maybe a learning curve or some challenges that have been presented.
There's always challenges, right? If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. It's kind of cliche, but we've really had a lot of success with public-private partnerships. So for the most part, the projects that we've engaged in, have incentives, from the town and the state that make the projects work. A lot of that are based around tax deals, long-term tax deals. East Hartford, we're buying the land from the town. We've got some state and some town money that's supporting the infrastructure for the project, and we have a 27-year tax deal. So just being able to navigate those, with the team that we have with us, with the attorneys and towns that are engaged and get it, is really the only reason a lot of those projects can be successful.
And I assume then that's how it's gonna keep being able to move forward as well.
Yeah, and you have communities that get it, and they want to be part of that, and then communities that don't get it, and then somewhere in the middle you have communities that get it, but you still have a lot of NIMBYism in Connecticut, whether it's for market rate housing or affordable housing. The old sort of concern was that it's going to bring a lot of families into town, and it's going to overburden the school systems. Well, the data for the most part over the last 10 or 15 years has shown that that's not the case. So that's less of a concern now.
And I imagine throughout the process, those are some of the things that you have to take into consideration when you're looking, about the landscape.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, we want to be a partner with the town. To build a community within the town's greater community, and we have to read the tea leaves and figure out what the town's looking for, what the community's looking for, and navigate that. It's always a little tricky. You're not going to make everybody happy, but you've got to sort of find the path of least resistance to provide what the market needs.
Yeah, and sometimes you probably have a bit different vision than what the town has and what the neighbors have, but it's really, really coming together and collaborating.
Yeah, some of it is education on our part to the town and the various stakeholders, but a lot of it is, us just sort of being open and listening and reading even early on before we go in and maybe educating them on what they really need as opposed to maybe what they think they need.
And maybe this kind of goes into some of the answers, that you've just said. But what do you think has made you successful, especially with this first project and getting more projects to come in this multi-family housing space?
Yeah, I think perseverance, collaboration. I mentioned the collaboration with the towns and the various stakeholders, but on our end, these projects are complicated to execute. So collaboration with our partners, our engineers, the attorneys that are involved, the architects, just to design something that fits, that literally and figuratively fits the landscape is a challenge, and we couldn't do that without really a united team that sort of buys into the vision, and and everyone's a part of executing it.
Are there any challenges that you've seen, because of where we are right now, coming out of the pandemic, specifically?
For sure. I mean, the supply chain and the pricing was a huge challenge, and it still is. Rents have been increasing tremendously, so that's helped to offset those challenges. For the most part, I think the pricing is now a little bit consistent. We're hoping it may come down, but still the predictability and the availability of materials is still uncertain. But sort of the monkey wrench of late are interest rates, right? So rents went up to cover the cost of construction, but the cost of capital has changed tremendously in a very short period of time. And that's made the economics of some deals not really pencil out, or you start planning in a year later when you're ready to put a shovel in the ground, the projects don't work. You need to come up with more equity. The banks are more cautious, so it's never easy.
Yeah, so many challenges thrown in your face at once.
Sure.
And, being able to take a look at them, overcome them, takes a lot of work and, like you said, perseverance.
Yeah, well, and sort of looking into the future and build. And this is a challenge, with a lot of the stakeholders in the towns and the incentives is, building in a big enough cushion where a year out things are going to change. But if they don't change, folks are saying, well, you have too much of a cushion. We're giving you too many incentives, and we're saying we're trying to position ourselves where, when things change, we can still be on track.
Yeah, and we've seen so many projects be delayed consistently because of supply chain issues with materials, just as one example.
Yeah, and there's other examples that are just a constant challenge. Is infrastructure, water, sewer, electricity. Just by way of example, energy. Solar, EV. I believe at the beginning of the year there were new mandates for electric vehicle charging. We were already going to implement electric vehicle charging. We had to go back and modify some permits, and that triggered a new requirement that 10% of our parking spaces be EV capable. So again, funds that we weren't prepared or hadn't budgeted for a project, even though we were already going to implement EV, new burdens, sort of in the middle of the process. So, predictability on all of these things is really key. If someone could tell us what the landscape would be 2 years from now, and we could calculate that in today, we'd be hitting the finish line, or the starting line and then the finish line, more often than not.
We all want that crystal ball, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just about finding it, and like you said, you can project as much as you can, but then you have to sell your predictions to someone else.
Yeah, and one of the things that that I wanted to talk about a little bit was property taxes. It's a big challenge and a big burden, and the uncertainty of property taxes. In the projects that we've been able to set long-term fixed tax deals, we've created a lot of certainty. There's communities that want housing, but building something and then sort of guessing at what the taxes are going to be. You can get a project finished and then figure out the taxes are higher than you projected, and you're really not going to make a lot of money, or they're going to be okay and the project's going to do well. That's it's a big burden on all multifamily real estate. I think if there was more predictability and sort of more engagement from towns on setting tax fixing deals, I think you'd have a lot more multifamily housing being planned.
Do you think that's one possible solution, really, to help get these projects moving?
For sure, and that's really what it's really what towns that are, are in favor of it, and we can educate them on the need for that, and other towns who don't, they don't get it, and they're just not going to be the beneficiary of new housing.
Shifting slightly, has workforce, we hear all across the state, especially with construction too, about workforce shortages. Has that impacted you at all in your timelines?
Timelines not as much as pricing, right? I mean, if the trades are in more demand, then you're going to pay more for them.
Okay, so that's another area that, the circle that's happening.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Recently, you were featured in the Hartford Business Journal's Power 25, so congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
What do you attribute some of that success, you've obviously had a lot of success, what do you attribute that to?
Really, I think, partnerships, collaboration. I mean, I couldn't do any of that on my own. Shared vision with various partners, perseverance, and just vision in general. One thing that that we didn't touch on is sort of the macro opportunity, for housing and redevelopment. And there's a lot of development going on in the state, or redevelopment, large scale, that maybe people don't realize relative to to the last 20, 30, 40 years. But a lot of our communities were built in the 50s and 60s, the main streets, and they were the places for, for shopping and congregating. And as we've sort of grown and expanded, and retail has changed, even before the advent of the internet, but now with that, there's a lot of opportunity to sort of really remake and repurpose, Main Street, quote unquote, in a lot of these suburbs. And that, to me, that's sort of an opportunity that I've seen that I think is unique, and and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of really reshaping these towns for the next 50, 60 years. Folks were trailblazers back then. There was nothing. You had highway exits that were empty farms. So someone created something, and I now can look back and see how that changed, as opposed to folks just creating something from nothing, but be able to being able to have a hand in shaping that future, is that's super rewarding.
And that's something that you're going to continue to look to do.
Yeah.
As you expand.
Yeah.
So right now, in terms of business, what portion is this multifamily housing and then commercial? Are you still kind of dipping in?
Yeah, I mean it ebbs and flows in each one. We've done a fair number of healthcare developments over the years. A lot of it was transactional, so we built a fair number of urgent care. As healthcare changes,
That's what I thought.
Yeah, as healthcare changes, urgent care is really now the front line where people get seen, and there's a learning curve there. But the pandemic really opened up everyone's eyes to that, to that need. So there's growth, there was saturation, and now that's sort of equalizing. I think there'll be more opportunity there, but that's kind of quiet for now. And we have some other retail stuff that we've, healthcare and retail sort of merged, and some pure retail stuff that we're doing out of state.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
And when you talk about out of state, are you in like the New England area? Has that grown too?
A little bit. I mean, we just finished a healthcare project in Worcester, Massachusetts. We've done some stuff in New York, but we have a project in the Carolinas that was just really opportunistic, an area with tremendous growth. And we got turned on to a piece of land down there that was surrounded by a significant amount of new housing, and they need basic services, grocery store, retail, et cetera. So we went and sort of dove into that, and are pursuing master planning this piece of land, changing the zone, working on infrastructure.
Working now in other states, is there anything that you've learned from that experience that you think could help Connecticut? That can be a loaded question.
Look, yes and no. I mean, it's hard to go backwards, but some of these, specifically North Carolina versus some other states that we worked in that are also mature markets. They've planned their infrastructure and their transportation infrastructure, 20, 30, 40 years out. We probably did that 40 or 50 years ago, and now we've hit saturation. And that's a challenge in some projects here. Is infrastructure? Is it taxed? Is the water and sewer maxed out? Can we not really add to that system? Where in those markets, It may not be ready today, but they have a plan that's going to get it there.
One of the things that you had mentioned, in terms of the business end, is being able to predict what's going to happen, what the needs are going to be, and the costs and problems associated that may arise. But you've also been able to, make some predictions about what's going to happen and make some leaps. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really about having the network. Like I said, we're opportunistic, and that, when an opportunity presents itself, having all of the right people that we can, sort of work with to dig into that opportunity and figure out, if it's worth taking. There's a lot of risk in real estate, so, we're risk takers. But so looking at opportunistic, you gotta manage and calculate your risk as much as possible. But the network that I've built, enables us to take those risks, but manage them and calculate them.
Yeah, I really think that's so interesting. When we first sat down and you were talking about being from Connecticut, you said it's that network that you've created that has now been able to help you throughout every aspect of your career.
Yeah, and some of that is the network that I've been building, my whole life here, and other parts of that is the network of people that we rely on every day for the projects that we plan and then design and then build, and those partners of ours have really sort of grown with us. So we're all sort of growing together and constantly learning from each other, and as a result, we're all having successes.
So is that maybe a lesson that you would share? Keep that network intact and growing?
Yeah, absolutely. Just every opportunity to meet someone new, in the industry or even outside that can have some effect. There's always a piece of knowledge to be gained, or a name to call down the road when a problem arises, and we say, hey, I remember that person had a solution for something similar. Maybe we can put two heads together and solve it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review and let us know if you have ideas for a future podcast. For a full list of episodes, head on over to CBIA.com.